We're having a joint meeting here tonight. Normally this is a planning and zoning evening. There's no business for the planning and zoning, so we decided to have the city council join in tonight. We'd have a comprehensive plan land use discussion. We haven't had any meetings on the comp plan since we were notified that a portion of our land was under a detachment petition. And so we got an extension from the Met Council where we have to file our comp plan update. And we got a year's extension on that pending the outcome of the detachment petition. So now we're getting back on track to have some discussions on land use. And so Liz wanted to have an opportunity to try and catch us up to where we are, where we've been. If you look at your packets, we've got a similar packet that we had a year ago in October. Because we haven't made a lot of progress because of changes that are going on here. So with that, I'll let people know that we have an agenda in the back, and we're going to recommend when we approve the agenda one change to that. But we'll start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ellen, if you would call roll for both the council and the Planning and Zoning Commission, please.
Jeff Pilon.
Present.
Dale Ames.
Present.
Randy Bettinger.
Present.
Harold Jorgensen.
Present.
Barry Wagner.
Present.
Dan Bryan.
Here.
Jason Alders.
Here.
Mary Rainville. Here. Robert Schiller.
Yep.
Paul Rickert.
Here.
Kelly Piero. Here. Kristen Moen.
Here.
And Liz Stockman. Here.
So I move that I'd like to amend tonight's meeting agenda to move to item number 1. It says floor items. It's actually going to be public comments. I'd like to give people an opportunity to comment publicly. But I'd like to move that to the end so that we can get through the information. So if people have questions or comments, they can see if it's addressed during the discussion tonight. And obviously, if it's not, or you want to say something in addition, then we have that opportunity at the end of the meeting to do that. So take notes. And so I move that we amend tonight's meeting agenda to have item number 1 to the last item on the agenda.
I'll second that.
All right. Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have one piece of business for the planning and zoning. There's a meeting minutes from August 27th, 2018. So from the commissioner, that will make a motion approving or amending those minutes.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Any other comments? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So one of the things that sometimes you get in a meeting like this, some people don't like to get up and speak at the microphone. We do have tablets in the back that if you want to have written comments, you can put your name and address and phone number on there and write your comments or questions down there, and we'll follow up on that. But like I said, in the public comments at the end, you'll be able to come up to the podium here and then give your name, your address, and your question or comment. So with that, what we'd like to do is have our planner, Liz Stockman, kick us off here, pick us back up where we left off with the comprehensive plan update and the land use plan discussion. There will be no votes taken tonight. Again, we're in the discussion phase. We have to have a preliminary plan submitted to our neighboring communities for their review and to the Met Council for their review and approval by July 2019. So we have some time to work on this, but we'd like to get going because we want to make sure that there's plenty of time for public comment and to get the documents in order before we have to submit them. After that submittal to the Met Council, we have, how much longer, till 2020?
Till August of 2020.
August of 2020 to have the final plan approved. So there is time that we want to make sure people understand that while there have been some changes and things people need to be updated on, we're not rushing through this, and we don't have a deadline from the Met Council that's going to force us to do things that aren't going to be able to be discussed and addressed publicly. So this will be an opportunity for that. So Liz, we'll turn it over to you. We have 5 items here to get through tonight. Review of where we are with the detachment annexation settlement, commercial industrial district expansion, potential, frontage road plan, park and trail amendments, and then some community perspectives, followed by public comments. Liz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief background. This slide is showing our 2030 land use plan that was adopted in 2009. As most of you here know, the Met Council requires updates every 10 years to the land use plans and the whole comprehensive plan. So originally, we began this in 2017, thinking we'd have to finish this at the end of 2018. We put everything on hold, as the mayor said, when the annexation request was submitted, and so we are picking up where we left off here. The original deadline was the end of 2018, and we got an extension through December of 2019. The plan really was not to make a whole lot of changes to this plan, but one of the biggest changes was that the Met Council removed our MUSA, meaning that the extension of urban services was not anticipated in the next 10 years, so we didn't have to show the urban service area on our map. We also no longer need to show or limit the development in that area to a 1/10 density, and had, through legislative action, the diversified rural removed from our land use plan. So what this proposed land use plan shows is some discussion that occurred last year, and at the time we weren't certain about this MUSA boundary or the diversified rural, so this again will be going away. What this red area shows here is possible areas, for expansion of commercial and or light manufacturing development. So a small area in the very southwest corner of the city, and then up in here the intent is an extension of our current industrial and commercial zones. So again, these are just possible areas. We would not need all of this land for commercial industrial development, but this is our kind of our search area.
Ms. Stockman, so if I can just interrupt there then. So just so people realize, these are discussion items. When there, a couple of years ago, some land that was designated commercial, the property owners requested to go back to residential. They paid for a comp plan amendment, and they got their land changed back to residential, and they have built houses for themselves and 2 of their children on that land, and designated the rest of that land as outlots. So 80 of those acres did go away. The reason that those in red are there for discussion, and we've always had a hot button down in the south corner there, southwest corner, these were for discussion items. We want the public to weigh in on those. I think, certainly there have been a lot of people that have weighed in on southwest corner. Our comprehensive plan and our policies right now don't allow for detached commercial zones like that. Everything has to be contiguous to the existing commercial zones that have been designated. But there was a request for some discussion on that. So again, I want to let people know these are discussions, no changes, nothing will be voted on here tonight or anytime in the immediate future. The areas you see in red near what we call consider the downtown area here, are likely much more than we need designated according to consultants. But the question was, go to those property owners and ask if they would be interested in having their land designated commercial. They could still use it residentially or agriculturally until they wanted to sell commercially. But the request was, do you want to be included for discussion? We've had property in the middle of the map there on the eastern edge of our commercial district. Those property owners have said they are not interested in doing that. So even though it shows on here, they've told us they don't want to participate at this point. There's a dairy farm on the western edge, the top western edge there. They have also said they're not interested in participating at this point. So even though that shows there as for discussion item, those areas really aren't in consideration at this point. Obviously, if the dairy farm doesn't go, the area to the west of that is not contiguous east-west. We'd have to determine if it's contiguous across Viking Boulevard or not. To my knowledge, the area south of Viking Boulevard, the 120 acres there, I don't know if those property owners were ever contacted, Liz?
I only know of one that showed up to our open house that we had, and I have not heard from any of the others.
So again, we're not certain what's probable, but again, we're not going to force people into the district, we're asking. So that's why the search area looks a little bigger than what we'll settle on most likely, because we're asking property owners if they want to participate or not. The other determination is, as you look at the comp plan, by 2040, what do we think we'll need for retail, commercial, and industrial land in the city? So, just to make sure that people don't get distracted, we are not designating those areas. It was simply last year when it was put on the map for discussion purposes.
Mr. Mayor?
Planner Stockton.
It might be important to note too that, remind people that just because it is rezoned a certain way doesn't mean that you have to stop using it for agriculture or anything else. So anyway, but yeah, this is undecided. So.
And it's a good point, because if you take a look on the eastern border there, there's a fair amount is zoned industrial and commercial. Those landowners at this point don't have any intention of doing anything but farming for a while. They don't have to change anything. But at some point when they do, the way it's designated right now, it would be designated commercial rather than residential. But they're free to use it any way they like until they change that designation. So they can farm there the rest of their lives as far as the plan goes.
Okay, so item number 1 was the MUSA area here. The number 2 change that we had talked about previously was possible expansion of commercial industrial. The third change was regarding the transportation plan that we adopted. We called it the Frontage Road Plan. It was adopted in 2013, and there were 8 quadrants, 4 of each of our main intersections. And quadrant number 2 was removed sometime thereafter through a comprehensive plan amendment. So we have 7 quadrants remaining, and there was some disagreement on the present council as to whether or not this should be included in our comp plan, so we would talk further about those details. This is kind of an overview of what the frontage road plan looks like. Very conceptual street layouts, the yellow dotted lines that you see. Through the red is indicating commercial, the blue is industrial areas. Doesn't mean the street has to be that way, but what happens is this was all spurred by the county limiting access points on Viking Boulevard. And someday, if this becomes a divided highway, there will be further limitations as far as access. So we're just trying to plan ahead in locating those important intersections that are typically away from the main intersection to allow stacking distance and turning movements and that kind of thing. So there'll be more discussion on that as we move forward. And We also had some discussions earlier this year, I believe it was February, regarding updating some of our park and trail plan objectives. And the Park and Trail Committee, with my assistance, we went through some of the existing layout, which is on the left. And a few of the things that we updated were this search area in the northwest corner of the city. We had a large landowner that built a home on kind of the southern shore there of Burns Lake. We just kind of relocated this search area, anticipating possible access from the west. We reshaped the search area along part of the brook here. It was a circular area. And some of the park committee members are hoping to get some canoe access or walk-in type access to portions of that creek. Another area we addressed, two additional or new area search areas, was in the southeast corner here and one in the southwest part of the city. So other than that, really, a lot of our park and trail system plan utilizes the local roadways and, you know, not constructing trails right next to a local road, but actually just using the local roadways as connections between some of the major trails that are planned. One of which is the regional trail that cuts through now then, and it comes up, let's see, it goes across Viking Boulevard here from Elk River and then goes up Now Then Boulevard and up through into St. Francis, and then it follows Old Viking Boulevard and goes to the east. So it will be fun to see that realized someday. Whether or not that'll be in our lifetime is yet to be determined.
I think that's a good point, Planner Stockman, too, that some of these things, long-range plan, this is our 2040 plan, and some of these things obviously won't be realized in our lifetime. When we sat down with the county to look at their road plans, and they realized things that they thought would be happening by 2010 didn't happen by 2020, still weren't going to happen. Some of the things they thought were in their 2030 plan, they've pushed out. So again, it's important to do long-range planning. It doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. There's a lot of things that have to be coordinated. But from a funding standpoint and from a designation standpoint of what we're intending to do, it's important to do the planning. So.
Correct. So this map is showing the detachment annexation area, 558.6 acres down in the southeast corner of Now Then. It is shown in this, on the land use map here, to show how much of this area was included in the MUSA or the, you know, long-term urban service area, and the fact that it abuts the Rogers Lake area where there are many 1-acre lot sizes. So the red area here is showing 55 acres of commercial designation, which is reduced from this purple striped area, which was the original commercial industrial land use designation. And then
Planner Stockman, just to again clarify that this is only in the detachment area, so the area above the red box and to the southwest of the red box hasn't changed with this if it wasn't part of the designation. Correct?
correct. So, right.
So the change is to the west of where your cursor is right there.
Right here.
And to the east there and to the west, because that land was purchased as part of the detachment petition.
Correct.
Those had been designated commercial areas, and those would no longer be commercial. The rest of the purple area there would continue to be commercial or industrial.
Yep, the focus right around the intersection there. So again, we're down to 55 acres of the detachment area, and then 503 acres in the yellow here, and a small portion of yellow adjacent to the brook. So it's important to note, I guess, why we ended up the way we ended up here with detachment annexation. I'm gonna jump ahead just a minute. It was a really tough decision. It was a sort of unthinkable that Nowland would lose part of its land, lose that many acres of land to another city. So when the discussions began between the two attorneys and the applicant, it just seemed to be in the best interest of both to proceed in this manner. The city was very interested in keeping this property in the city limits, keeping that tax base, having it proceed through the comprehensive plan update, the 2040 update, and being able to control what happens rather than to watch it from across the border. So again, we felt this was in the best interest of the city and the residents. Actually, the 2-acre lot size is consistent with our current comprehensive plan. And in saying that, I mean that anything rural residential is or can be 1 acre or greater. So we've always had, as you know, a 5-acre average, but the 2-acre lot size is still consistent with our land use. Now, having said that, that does not mean the whole city has to be 2-acre lot sizes, and I certainly wouldn't expect it to be. So, there is a lot to think about in looking at all of this. So, I wanted to emphasize that this portion of, the 2-acre area then, not only 2-acre minimum lot size, but a 2-acre average, is 2.25% of the total land area in Now Then. So even though 500 acres seems like a lot of land, it's really just over 2% of Now Then's land area.
Planner Stockman, again, that there will be, I'm sure, extensive discussion later, but one of the things in recognition that certainly was the intention of Oak Grove in accepting the petition to designate all of that land at least 2.5 average. So the lots that would have gone in there would have been 2.5 at best in that. And Oak Grove certainly, seeing an opportunity that's something they would have never had before, would have taken that opportunity to develop that extensively, well into our community. So the issue at hand if we were to lose that battle, Oak Grove fully intended to have that developed at those smaller acreages as soon as the developer wanted that done. So as the planner said, we would have lost all control to designate zoning regulations or any other conditions on that land. It would just have been imposed as a peninsula sticking into our city without any control on the part of Now Then.
This map is interesting to look at because it shows parcels by size. And again, the light blue area around Rogers Lake and some of these older areas have the 1-acre lot sizes. So, in that consideration, this 2-acre area was somewhat of a transition from these 1-acre lots up into the north and west areas of Now Then that are larger lot sizes typically.
And again, Planner Stockman, those 2-acre lots were grandfathered in before you'll see a number of those were around Twin Lake, down the Rogers Lake area. You can see lots that were put in well before we had a a plan to keep the larger lot sizes. Those are older homes, and they were grandfathered in. We have not been developing 1 acre lot sizes since we become a city, so.
Correct. So just to reiterate the timeline here, that nothing can happen before the approvals from the city, county, and state levels. So we will be submitting a draft of our comp plan to Met Council on July 31st of next year. Then there's a 6-month mandatory review period for the adjacent jurisdictions. And then the final plan needs to be approved by the following year, August of 2020. And then following that approval, the city would undertake any zoning changes necessary to allow for those 2 acre average and 2 acre minimum lot sizes. So that requires quite a few changes zoning wise. So obviously lot size, we have setback changes that will be needed, accessory building changes that will be needed, and a whole host of other things related to what we'd like to see in this area. The other thing is, we're unsure of the developer timing on this. He did indicate, or one of the petitioners indicated to Oak Grove, that he was still in the farming stages and leasing land, and he was possibly as many as 10 years out on development opportunities.
And then again, Planner Stockman, with zoning changes like that, there will be public hearings. So this will be a public process. Obviously, you can see that it's a long process. It will be public. And everything that Planner Stockman was just saying right there addresses the petitioner's land only. So it's only in the settlement area. This is not applied to, at this point, anywhere else in the city of Nelda. So it's a long process. It's a public process. There will be input on that. And as the petitioner said to the city of Oak Grove, that he's got a 10-year plan out here. So he's not planning on doing things for 10 years. We'll see.
Okay, so there are numerous considerations affecting land use decisions, and as I mentioned, the rural residential designation is not going to change. So what we saw in the land use plan, the light green area, all of the rural residential stays the same. The city council, the city as a whole, and part of our existing comp plan, we always try to have transitions between differing land uses, especially for this new annexation detachment area. We would love to have low visual impacts from the roadways, meaning from the main roads, we see trees, we see what appears to be rural, and we keep those viewscapes natural. So that would be a big consideration in the design and layout of streets and lots when we get to that point. As you know, there are many wetlands in Nowden, creeks, and so the environmental factors are huge regarding soils, shorelands, erosion, stormwater. We'd like to consider, tree preservation if necessary. Pollution is covered by the state, MS4, permitting and such. And then groundwater contamination is always at the foremost. We have to be sure that those 2 acre lots can provide a primary and a backup septic system as required by the state. So we may look at, net lot area versus gross lot areas and those kinds of things. You may need to limit impervious surfaces, driveways, buildings, lots of things to think about.
Again, Planner Stockman, just to clarify, you're saying, so if it doesn't meet the environmental or the zoning conditions, you don't automatically get a 2 acre lot. It still has to meet all the conditions of the zoning and environmental.
Right, exactly. And then, so I mentioned most of these zoning factors. We really would like to see or push for quality and amenities, plan the neighborhoods in this annexation area, preserving open spaces that exceed our current standards, and possibly look at, options for variable layouts. One thing that the state looks at, Met Council looks at is, are those lots able to be re-subdivided someday in the long term, if services are ever extended. But again, that may not be in our lifetime, but planning takes time and it's worth consideration. So just a couple maps again. This map is showing the plats in now then by decade. And it's kind of interesting to look at. The orange ones here are in the 2000s. And you can see how they're fairly random, just spread around. When people are ready to develop, they develop. It hasn't been, we haven't limited our land use in Nowland by, multiple residential districts like a lot of suburbs are. So we still will have that opportunity for landowners to split in 5-acre averages as they wish. And again, this map was just the lot sizes, parcels by size.
So again, Planner Stockman, if you take a look at the parcels by size, you take a look at the development, as the planner said, it has been fairly random when a property owner decides to develop. They can do with their land as they wish, but we have some nice chunks that are still being farmed, and we've got some good farmland here yet in now then. Some nice high ground, some rich, there's a fair amount of wet, but the areas that you see here, the bigger parcels are being farmed. And the farmers that are doing that right now still have an interest in that. And so one of the things that we've talked about in our comp plan in 2009, and we wanted to keep into the 2030 plan, is how do we make certain that in that we don't develop in such a way that those big parcels that are being farmed right now disappear? How do we plan so those people can farm as long as they want to, without restricting their opportunity to make income off their land when they're ready to do that? That's the planning process we're talking about here. But right now, the interest is in a lot of these areas. This is disappearing from Anoka County. And a lot of the cities around us, these large parcels have disappeared. So it's something that we need to make sure that we consider as we extend our 2040 plan here.
So I want to highlight some of the community perspectives, and which are also identified as goals in our existing comprehensive plan, which we still hold to and which we want to see included in our 2040 plan. And first and foremost, we do want to keep the rural residential development that everybody desires in the city. We'd like to establish some permanent open space, whether that's in the form of agricultural land or whether that's in the form of parks or conservation areas. We would like to expand parks, trails, and recreation as we grow, and keep areas for recreation aside from our own little properties we have. And then fourth, minimize the environmental impacts that I had mentioned previously. Always when we're planning and developing, we look at efficient use of land and willingness to strengthen our tax base and grow in an orderly manner. So at this time, we would welcome your thoughts and perspectives. Unless the mayor has anything else to add, we would like for you to come up to the mic, or as he said, you can leave your comments on the paper back on the table. Thank you.
Let me start with anybody on the council or the planning commission that wants to add or comment or question.
Mr.
Councilmember Bettinger.
I'd like to see that our frontage road plan that's in our plan now be removed. There's no other community that I'm aware of in Anoka County that's along the 22 corridor that has the same type of plan as part of their comp plan. Let the county deal with that at the time the land's being developed. They review the plans for access, where it's gonna be allowed, where they want service roads. That's their road. Let them deal with the access. We shouldn't be, we've chased away a lot of development and prospective businesses along 22 and 47 with these concepts, and I'd like to see them go away. The other thing is the park and trail plans. I believe there's too many trails shown in our plan. We talked about this earlier. It's about $90 a linear foot this year when they added a new one down in Ramsey. So that's almost $500,000 a mile. There's probably 30, 40 miles of trail on our plan. That's a lot of money. We can't afford to install them. And once they're installed, then you have to maintain them. We can't afford that. But we need to define more of a regional trail system to connect our parks to the regional trail, stuff like that. We don't need that many miles of trail.
Anybody else on the council or commission?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
in regards to Councilmember Bettinger's comments on the park and trail plan, as we've been told numerous times, and as we've stated numerous times, just because they are there does not mean we will do them. But in order for us to be able to access any possible grants, whatever type of grants are available, it has to be in our plan. No different than what the Upper Rum River watershed told us when they were here, is that if it's not there, you can't get a grant. So it's looking to the very far future. It may be that none of those are developed, but we cannot develop them or access any grant funds if they aren't on our map.
Any other comments, council, commission? All right, how about from the floor? If you care to speak to it directly, please step up to the podium. Otherwise, we do have notepads in the back. You can write out your comments. Is the red light or green light on there?
Red.
Can you hit the bottom button lightly?
There, it's green.
Okay, good.
Hey, my name's Larry Skokwist, and I live at 6840 213th Avenue in Elk River. I've lived in Burns or Nowden for 65 years, and I am a fourth generation that called Nowden home, spanning over 125 years. The city is out from Med Council's thumb. If you look at the map, especially that one that's on the wall up there right now, there's not as much land available as you think because of the wetlands. You look on the east side there, it's almost all developed, and a few chunks that are left there, there's not much. Many places developed. So there's not as many places there to develop. So the most efficient use of land is what the word that I see on the wall up there is, efficient use of land. Should be under the 2-acre density rather than the 5-acre. Some people in smaller lots do a great job of taking care of their lot, but there's a lot that don't. You see old cars, junk, weeds, brush. A lot of people don't want to take care of 5 acres. We're at the point with our comp plan to be completed that is a great time to change some policies. There's also the people that own the land, that if they go to a 2-acre density, that'll increase their value per acre by at least 30%. We've had very little growth in the last 10 years, and our lots could be more affordable. And that doesn't restrict the 2-acre lots to just a small area. It is a 5-acre lot citywide. So I think the 2-acre lot should be citywide. And I would ask Liz, I have a question on letter C about applicability. I wonder if you could explain that a little bit? It's about,
Letter C on my agenda?
Yeah.
Or on? Oh, frontage road plan?
yeah, about the applicability. Yeah, page 2C of your TPC planning letter.
Ability of other landowners.
Applicable, okay. Okay, so what I was pointing out in my outline here was when we get to this land use planning, we need to consider, yes, if the 2-acre lots will be limited to the annexation detachment area, or not. Now, the assumption right now is that yes, they will be limited there, but there are numerous options, to allow that to be extended elsewhere if the city council chooses to do that. One option would be establishing a new zoning district, different from the rest of the city. Second option is plan unit developments, which are flexible and basically review flats on a kind of a case-by-case basis. They require specific land use planning for larger parcels. One option would be to only allow contiguous properties to the annexation detachment area to have 2-acre lot sizes. So it would be very orderly in extending into the rest of Nowden and somewhat limiting. Another way to limit and or allow 2 acres elsewhere would be to establish a minimum area. So maybe you need 80 acres or 160 acres to be able to have a 2-acre lot elsewhere in the city. I have no idea at this point what the city council wants. That's why we were unable to put together any details or any proposed land use plans at this time, not knowing what they want. There are so many options.
It just seems like there's a lot of restrictions, why are we making it so difficult?
Well, it depends who you are, that's exactly. I mean, if you're ready to sell, Larry,
Yeah.
it's different for someone that, I don't know, that has a 5 or 10 or a 20-acre lot that doesn't want to see their neighbor,
But if you look at, like I say, there's some 40-acre pieces in there, but there's not a lot left on this east side that's open for development.
East of 47
Well,
or east
yeah,
of?
follow 47 right up there. I mean, it's either developed, there's not much left there. I mean, make that piece, the 2-acre lot bigger or something, final line, south of 22 or something. But I think in planning, if you're planning in the future, you should be planning for a bigger spot than that.
Well, that's definitely an option, to have a district where you're designating the limits of that lot size.
Because
I think it needs to be expanded.
And the purpose of the comments here is for that. You were able to weigh in and say,
Yep.
this is what you think. It needs to be said, the applicability part, item C here, these haven't been discussed with the council yet.
Well, I understand, I just wanted to, I know this is very early, and you're gonna have lots of meetings on it, but I just wanted to bring it out to talk about it.
And these are Liz is saying, here's some options. And one of the challenges whenever the council discusses options is immediately people start saying, here's what's being done. I want to reiterate, nothing's being done. We're simply discussing options. As Mr. Skokowitz is saying, the option you would recommend is to expand that area
Right.
to a wider, if not all of Nowland, at least a larger area of Nowland. These are things that Planner Stockman has put in here. This is the first time we've really seen them too, because the settlement is fresh. We haven't had a council workshop to discuss
Right.
these options at this point.
I was just,
But we're gathering
Discussing,
information,
right.
so,
Thank you.
so thank you for your inputs. Anybody else in the audience want to, weigh in?
Debbie Mahatka. I'm at 7560 Viking Boulevard, Northwest Anoka. I own 80 acres in Nowland total. Now, since I have retired and probably won't be farming any longer, I too would like my land to be rezoned to achieve 2-acre lots. My 60 acres is on 201st, and it borders now a residential development to the west, so making mine an easy development possibility. I attended the Oak Grove Council meeting regarding the request of Nowland property owners to detach annex to Oak Grove. Mayor Mark Horan of Oak Grove stated that he felt property owners should be able to do what they wanted with their own land. And he and his council voted to allow them to annex to achieve 2.5-acre lots versus Nowland's 5-acre lots. Now with the settlement and agreement Nowland has made to reduce lots down to 2 acres in order to keep them in Nowland, you have set a precedent. So we feel we are here to also request this 2-acre lot per homeowner. In the September 14th Anoka Union Herald edition, Mayor Pilon said he is realizing some of the inefficiencies and ineffectivenesses that Kent Raisler has pointed out since your mayorship over the last 4 years. Mayor Pilon said the land use will be designated by the 2040 comp plan, open to the public comment until 2019, and that he will look forward to other opportunities for feedback. And rest assured, we will continue to follow and provide further feedback. Several state legislatures were able to get a provision in this year's state bonding bill, which applies to Nowland, that requires the Met Council to allow the city of Nowland to determine our own land use designations in our updated comp plan. This would also give the city more tax base to come into the city. In closing, I'd like to say that people's lives change, and rightly so. And so should land uses be able to change. And so, from farming, should be able to change from farming to possibly developing. And as Mayor Corn of Oak Grove says, farmers need this ability for their retirement. Also, I'd like to just touch on the 2 things that Liz has. And as far as the frontage road plan, I'd say this should be removed. This frontage road has turned many a prospect, residential or commercial, away from purchasing properties. As soon as our planner brought it up, they were turned off and left. So it speaks for itself. And I agree with you, Councilmember Bettinger, wholeheartedly. As for the parks and trails, I agree again with you, Councilmember Bettinger. There's not a need for the trails. Where are they going to meet? Where are they going to go? And to Mary's response, you need a plan for grants? Well, if you can't afford the trails, why even apply for a grant? Thank you.
I want to go on record here. Mr. Raisler is saying that in the press that he's gotten the improvement in the administrative and the way the city's running now then as part of this. Mr. Raisler never once talked to the city council in all of this detachment. He talked to the city of Oak Grove. He talked to his lawyers. never once was it ever brought up about the inefficiency of how we do things in now then. He says he prefers how things are done in Oak Grove to any other city. He said Oak Grove should be in the dictionary under the definition of a well-run city. He prefers, as he said in the article, they know how to develop. And if now then residents want to develop, that's why Mr. Raisler wanted to get into Oak Grove, to be able to develop in these smaller sizes in a city that knows how to develop. So I think that is an important distinction. I think that the comment that was quoted from me in the paper, we have had some inefficiencies. We've had poor communication within our staff and between our staff and council, and we are addressing that in a new hire in the city office. We have seen significant improvement in recent weeks on how staff is communicating and council are communicating. Our last meeting, even with the assessor's time before the council, came in at 35 minutes. So we are seeing some improvements in efficiencies. It's not anything to do with how Mr. Raisler addressed anything, because we didn't know specifically what he was concerned with, because he never did talk to us.
Oh,
So-
not the way the paper reads it, Mayor.
Well, you can ask anybody on the council,
It
Mr.
said,
Raisler never talked to us.
Mr. Raisler said that the city contacted him and asked what they needed to do in order to keep him in Malvern.
Right? And the city, council is all here. There was a lawyer that represented the city that contacted his attorney, saying, what's it gonna take to get this settled? Because it's gonna get very expensive to do otherwise. This was gonna be a long, drawn-out legal battle. But the city itself was not negotiating with Mr. Raisler. Councilmember Rickards, you wanted to comment?
I just want to go on record that you did make comments that you had conversations with Mr. Raisler, not maybe the city as a whole, but you as yourself.
Mr. Raisler called us and wanted to know, had we changed our comp plan to his favor? Yes. And
So
when
I
I-
just wanted to point out, we as a city may not have had the conversations with him, but.
But the conversation of what's it gonna take to settle
Yes,
this, yeah.
but per your own comments, you had made several comments that you had conversations with him, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
He had called me, but that was not part of the conversation, so.
Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockman?
I think the important thing to note is that Mr. Raisler did not come forward and request a comp plan change or any sort of, concept plan, submit anything to request any change in density. That's the point that I felt like the mayor was trying to make.
Yeah, all conversation was with the neighboring cities, so. As far as that goes. I mean, he certainly did reach out and say, what? Other comments?
I'm Dennis Berg. I live on 18111 Nowthen Boulevard Northwest. And actually, I just came up here to listen, so I'm really not too well prepared. But in looking around the room, I think I'm the only signature left on the original comp plan and the original zoning ordinance after the comp plan. Dale Ames was part of some of the early planning and zoning meetings. I got involved in the 60s when it was the North Anoka County Planning League. And then in the 70s, we ended up on our own. But I think what's important is that as we look what we're going to do with lot sizes, and that's always the elephant in the room, where we're going to land, how we ended up with the 5 acres. And thinking back then, I gave my comp plan to the Historical Society about 10 years ago. I called them today, and I can go down there and read it. I'm hoping the city has one, and I'd encourage the council to read the comp plan from 1970. But some of the history, in 1960, Anoka County, through legislation, transferred zoning authority to the townships. There were 9 townships at that time. So Burns Township ended up all of a sudden getting in the zoning business. We had no zoning ordinance, we had no comp plan. And if you go around the township, you can see some of the lots that were created early on. We had lots that were created that literally would flood 100% in the spring, and yet they're lots of record. We passed the zoning ordinance fairly quick, and it was basically 1 acre and a few other things just so we could get a handle on it. Found out almost right away it wasn't enforceable because we didn't have a comp plan. We had developers coming in and doing some really strange things and doing developments and recording them, no roads. We had no controls. So the town board at that time, and it's one of the hardest things to do in elected office, and believe me, I'd never do it again, we put a moratorium on development. We stopped everything. No building permits, no zoning for a year. So we could get a comp plan and get a zoning ordinance and get a handle on things. That was a very ugly year. We had the Met Council telling us we had to go, and initially they wanted us to go to 1 lot per 40 in the north half, 4 lots per 40 in the south half. Now in 1970, we were a dairy township. I mean, there were dairy farms all over the place. And dairy farmers can tend to get vocal. All the meetings back then started at 8 o'clock instead of 7 because you had to give them time to get done milking. But a good percentage of them didn't want outsiders moving in because it created other problems with them running around their fields and complaining about manure and whatnot. And a good percentage of them wanted no control whatsoever. I can remember Arnold Krieger coming up and testifying that he paid for his farm digging potatoes out of the frozen ground with his bare hands, and nobody was going to tell him what he could do with it now. And to a certain extent, you had to respect that, that side of it, with property rights. The Met Council had a pretty good hook in us back then because if you didn't have an approved comp plan by the Met Council, they controlled where the federal share of funding for highways went. It didn't hurt the township much because we weren't getting federal dollars to speak of. But if the county was to do a road project in Anoka County, in Burns Township, and we didn't have an approved plan, we wouldn't be able to use federal dollars. And the county uses a lot of federal dollars as a percentage of the cost of road projects. That changed after we had the comp plan approved when Senator Mondale got a bill passed that created the Transportation Advisory Board, and they have the final say, and they're made up of both elected and non-elected. So that it changed that, strong selling point of why we were more subject to what they were telling us. The other thing was sewers. We had horror stories that if you didn't have at least 5 acres, you were going to contaminate your own well and your neighbor's well. Back then, there was no sewer inspections. You could put in a sewer without a permit. Most sewers had the tanks had dirt bottoms. They were cesspools. And we didn't know what the true answer was. I think today it's safe to say you can build a safe sewer on less than 5 acres. That was a debate back then, if in fact it was possible. Between those three, that had a lot to do with us ending up at 5 acres. But the 5 acres was really a compromise between the 4 and 40 that the Met Council took a firm stand on and what most of the residents wanted at that time, which was, all over the map, but a lot of them didn't want anything. So the 5 acres ended up, being something that we all could have lived with. We were able to get the Met Council to approve the comprehensive plan. And one of the things that we had to agree to back then was what our projected growth would be under the new plan. So when we did the zoning ordinance, we had to kind of keep that in mind and give ourselves some control over how fast developments were going to come in. And I don't remember the numbers. I know it's in the comp plan, but I know 20 years later, I had to write a report that, where we were. And we were within like 3% of what we said we were going to be. So we pretty much hit the target with the 5 acre lots. But there was a lot of restrictions within 5 acres that have been relaxed since. But part of the reason they were there was to control the growth and keep the Met Council in support of what we're doing. So I'm not really here to say to go to 20 acres or go to 1 acre, but I think it's important that we understand why it's 5 acres. And I think we can see a lot of good things that happened. I can see a lot of things that probably should have been done different back then. But still a good place to live, so we didn't fail too bad. Thank you.
Dennis? once. Going twice. Anybody else? All right. Liz, anything else?
Nothing else from my end.
All right. And I will accept a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I will be adjourned.
A motion is second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dale, were you,
at a meeting.
along with that whole ride? No, I couldn't. I was